Have you ever heard of Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table? This kid, Arthur, ordinary boy, goes and pulls the sword from the stone and becomes King of England. And he has his Knights of the Round Table that advise him. Every lord has a lady and every knight fought for their king. But is this really what feudalism was? Let's find out. Okay, we're going to talk about two different types of feudalisms today. One is in medieval Europe and the other is in feudal Japan. They're very similar systems, and it's almost amazing because Japan's very isolated with the exception of trading with China. And so for these two areas of the world to have almost identical social civilizations, social structures, and not have hardly any contact with each other is amazing. So feudalism is both a social and economic system. We're going to talk about the social aspect of it first. So just like our other social classes, we have someone on top, followed by another group, etc. So in Europe, the person on top is the king. And the king gets his authority from the church. He owns all these lands because he is God's representative. He is put on this earth to rule these lands for God. And so he owns all the lands. But he can't control them all by himself. And so he is going to ask his lords, he's going to divide up the lands by the lords for them to take care of regional problems for him. And in return, he is going to give them these lands, and they get a percentage of the wealth from the lands, and they get favor with the king, which might lead to more lands later, which could lead to more wealth. The king, however, does not have an army. The lords have the army. The knights are the lord's army. And so it's a you need to keep each other happy relationship, where if the king needs to raise an army, he has to ask the lords, and so he wants to keep the lords happy for when he needs to borrow the knights. So again, the lords are under the kings. They are given lands by the kings and wealth from those lands, and they try to curry favor with the king so they can keep those lands or maybe get more lands. And so again, it's a let's keep each other happy relationship. Under the lords are the knights, and the knights are paid by the lords to protect their lands. Again, the king doesn't have an army, and so when he needs an army, he calls upon the lords to provide the knights for him. If there is an invasion or an uprising in an area, the knights defend the lord's lands. Under the knights are the serfs. The knights protect the serfs because the lords pay them to protect the serfs. And the serfs are the ones who work the land. They are going to be the ones that pay taxes to both the lords and the king. And they also pay money to the church, so it's not a good situation to be a serf. You work really hard and everyone takes your money. But the Lord provides safety for you through the knights, and he also provides you land where you can make a little bit of money to support yourself, and gives you a community, which we'll talk about in a second. So again, European feudalism is kings, followed by lords, knights, and then serfs on the bottom. In Japan, we have a very similar system. The top position is a little different. We have a shogun who's a military leader who really rules, but we also have an emperor who is more like a symbolic figurehead. You know, people today would compare him to the Queen of England. You know, that the Queen of England doesn't really rule England, the Parliament rules England, but she is the head of state. She is kind of the figurehead of England. The emperor was kind of like that in feudal Japan. He was almost like a spiritual figurehead, that he was what they all pledged their loyalty to, but he didn't actually control the country. The shogun controlled the country. Under the shogun are daimyos, which are regional warlords that controlled land, and so again, we want to keep each other happy. Under the daimyo are samurai, which are the equivalent of knights. They protect the land for the daimyos, and whenever there are internal or external problems, they fight for the daimyos, and they protect the serfs. And under our samurai are serfs, who, again, work the land and then pay a percentage of taxes to both the shogun and the daimyo. Both the knights and the samurai have an honor code that they live by. For the knights, it's chivalry, and you think of chivalry as kind of this romance. That's really not what it was. It was an honor code that the knights lived by. It didn't have much to do with romance. Yes, they really should be nice to ladies, but it wasn't like, I'm going to hold the door open for you. So if you hear someone say chivalry is dead, they really don't understand what chivalry is. In Japan, Hey guys, sorry for the costume change, or the hair change rather. I forgot to record this when I was recording the rest of the feudalism video, and so I'm recording this on a different day, but I wanted to let you know about the honor code for Japan, which is known as Bushido, and it stressed loyalty to country and family first. So it's very much like chivalry, it's the honor code for Japan. Now back to your regularly scheduled program. In Europe, the economic part of feudalism is known as the Manor System. And the manor is kind of like a really big plantation. You have the big house or the castle where the lord lives. And then you have his lands where the serfs work, but serfs also had homes and little towns and shops, a church. And so they really could do everything they need to do on the manor. And the knights would go around and protect the manor. So it's kind of like, again, a really large plantation that you have kind of the big house, and then you've got little houses where the serfs lived, you have lands where they worked, you had shops, and you had a church. So it's a combination of a plantation and a small town. Another thing in Europe is the three-field system, and think of if you were going to divide up a piece of land in 4 parts. If you plant all 4 parts of this land year after year after year, it's going to destroy your soil. And so what they would do is they would rotate, and one piece would always be free to replenish the soil. And so every 4 years, the piece of land would get a break. And this kept the land better off. It kept it from drying up. And so it was actually better for people to let the land rest for a little bit. A term you need to know is vassal. They're kind of between a lord and a knight. They are a military elite that is given land by the lord for their service. Women in Europe are equal in salvation under Christianity, but that's about it. Very much a patriarchal society, and women are even seen as seductresses. They're blamed for original sin. They're blamed for what Eve did. They blame Eve for the fall of man. Women in Japan are treated a little bit better. It depends on what social class you're in. We still have patriarchal society, but women in the merchant class, women could work in that class and earn money for themselves. But if you were a noble woman, then you really had less rights than if you were a lower class woman. We're also got something in Japan called Kabuki Theater. This is a type of theater where the men played all the roles, so we don't have any women, just like we see in Shakespeare. There are no women actors, and they use masks to portray the characters. And throughout Japanese history, we're going to see this type of theater change from time to time and even be used politically. I'm going to link a TED Talk in the playlist. You can learn more about Kabuki Theater. Feudalism in Europe is going to last until about the time of the Black Death, Renaissance, Reformation, and then it's going to start to fall apart. Last time I talked about with the Black Death, it's going to kill 2/3 of the population. And that's going to hurt the lord significantly because they're going to lose a lot of their workers. And so the workers are going to have more power because there's less of them. They can demand more. And so a serf who's not able to move before, because serf is kind of a form of slavery, they're not able to move from the land before, now are, because the lord can't enforce the rules. And another lord is able to pay the serf more, and so they go to the better job. In Japan, feudalism is going to last from period 3 all the way to period 5 with the Meiji Restoration we see in the late 1800s. And so it's going to last for a very long period of time. Next video, we're going to talk about the medieval church, the medieval Christian church in Europe, and I'll see you then.